Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining the National Immigration Law Center's webinar on the recent raids. I know we've all been very concerned since even before elections around the many comments that Trump made around deporting 2 to 3 million immigrants. And last week we saw the beginning of what seems like increased immigration enforcement. So we have today with us several speakers who are going to talk about these enforcement actions and really what the response has been on the ground in different parts of the country. That includes my colleagues Myra and Jesse here at NILC. And we're also joined by several guests who are going to talk about what's happening in Austin, Texas, Los Angeles, California, and Georgia. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Myra, who's going to give us an overview of what we saw around the country last week. Oh, and also one reminder that we will be sending out the slides with the recording of the webinar tomorrow. So don't worry, you will get a copy of the slides. So Myra?
Yes. Hello, everyone. So the past 13 days now, we have been hearing various reports across the country that's describing the different types of ICE enforcement activity. Some of these reports have been confirmed. Well, there's other reports that we're still in the process of verifying. And I wanted to touch on some of the confirmed activity during this presentation so that we can all have an equal understanding of what's happening. Next slide. Hi, next slide, please.
Oh, yeah, it's on the next slide. Hello?
Okay. Yes.
It's on the next slide.
I'm seeing overview. Okay. So some of the confirmed locations where ICE has arrested immigrants include Austin and nearby areas, as well as various areas in Georgia. Some reports in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. There's also reports of counties near Los Angeles, and there's also many other unconfirmed locations. So we have various speakers on this call who will speak more in depth regarding what's happening in Austin, Georgia, and Los Angeles. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about New York and Chicago. So in New York, we've heard that 5 individuals were arrested and detained by federal immigration agents. That happened mostly on Staten Island, and it was over the course of the past few days. The 5 individuals were arrested through 5 separate raids, and it's been in neighborhoods with high immigrant populations. 4 of those individuals were arrested in their homes, while 1 arrest took place outside of a courthouse. In Chicago, there's immigration officials have confirmed that they've arrested more than 160 people, and they claim that they're conducting these raids through regular targeted enforcement, but we're still following up on additional information regarding the specifics on who's been detained. I want to comment on some of the unconfirmed locations because there's been various detailed reports of ICE arrests in other locations throughout the country, and some of these reports have later turned out to be false alarms. So I want to highlight that. I want to highlight these reports as a reminder that it is important for everyone who's on, especially those on the ground, to obtain as much detailed information as possible whenever there's any rumors of a raid, so that the information can be confirmed as soon as possible and so that advocates can respond urgently. Otherwise, we run the risk of helping to increase fear within the community in a climate where our community is already fearing for its safety. Next slide, please. From the various reports of the cities listed above, we are also hearing contradicting testimonials regarding who's being targeted. So ICE is claiming that they are engaging in routine enforcement activities by going after individuals with serious criminal convictions, by people who are posing a threat to the public safety, and by going after people who have stayed despite having deportation orders. They've released multiple statements where they claim they labeled various possible convictions, all to highlight that they are only engaging in a certain targeted operations. However, what we are also hearing from individuals on the ground is that, at least in Los Angeles, individuals have also been arrested on collateral arrest. So, and ICE has confirmed that individuals whom they encounter while conducting some of these other targeted operations can be arrested as well. We have also heard of reports of arrests in workspaces. One individual was actually arrested after ICE showed up at the location searching for another employee, but that employee wasn't there, so they asked for that individual for an ID and found that that person had a prior order of removal. So that person was arrested. We've also heard that in a field in Florida, various individuals were arrested after ICE showed up with a mobile biometrics unit. Next slide. So what we're seeing from different trends across the country is that there's a few different tactics that are being employed. The majority of the individuals who have been arrested were arrested at home. There's also been some reports that there were several individuals who were arrested at an apartment. In addition to that, there's some reports of workplace enforcement. I just mentioned the report regarding a field where the ICE agents used mobile biometrics on the workers, and these mobile biometrics are handheld devices where ICE agents can fingerprint individuals to find out if they are deportable. And right now, some of these, in addition to these various tactics, there's a few other unconfirmed reports regarding public transportation, and as I was mentioning earlier before, it's really important that we find out whether some of the reports are accurate, because otherwise we run the risk of informing individuals that things may be happening in public spaces and creating an additional chilling effect, when in reality we need to be helping the community feel safe and helping the community understand that there are various advocates on the ground who are here to help them. Next slide. So in light of what we've covered, there are many groups on the ground who have developed hotlines to assist individuals who can report a raid. We have listed some of these hotlines here so that you can be aware of this information, but I'd also like to invite all callers on this presentation to share with us any additional hotline information or any other information on local resources so that we can help you distribute that information. Next.
All right, thank you, Myra. And as Myra said, if anybody is part of a local raid response network, please share the information with us via the chat box, and we can compile that information and share it with everybody who's registered for this webinar. So next, we're going to talk about some of the specifics in terms of what we've been seeing across the country. So to discuss Georgia, we have Laura Rivera from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And Adelina, are you on? Yeah, I don't believe Adelina Nichols is on. So Laura, if you're on, could you go over what has been happening in Georgia this past week?
Yes, we have seen raids and sweeps over the past week in 3 major metro areas. Obviously, Metro Atlanta is a big target in communities with high immigrant populations on the outskirts of the city. Augusta, Savannah, and also more rural communities in the center of Georgia's agriculture industry in places like Moultrie. We had a chance to talk with a number of folks detained, and from their testimonies, it's clear that many people with no criminal backgrounds or prior ICE enforcement encounters are being swept up in raids. They're taking place in unmarked vehicles that are pulling over individuals in their cars in the morning on the way to work, or conducting early morning raids at homes. There were some reports, not confirmed by ICE obviously, but multiple independent testimonies of ICE agents using ruses to obtain consent to enter into people's homes or to get them to get out of their vehicles. In one instance, there was, after individuals were detained in North Atlanta and placed in a transport van. The transport van collided with another vehicle on the highway. These individuals did not have their seatbelts on, and they did not receive medical attention until arriving in the Atlanta City Detention Center. So they waited some time before receiving medical attention. In one other instance, a man who had no criminal history and had been in the country for over a decade entered the home of a relative where he had seen ICE agents go in, and he was swept up in the raid, even though the intended target, according to one of the ICE agents, was not present in the home. From the limited reports we have been able to confirm, we haven't heard of the use of mobile biometric units, and we have not seen an awful lot of cooperation from local law enforcement agencies, at least in terms of carrying out the raid itself in coordination with ICE.
All right, thank you, Laura.
Is now a good time to, is now a good time to give the hotline numbers?
Yes, that'd be great. And for people listening, we will write down the hotline number and share it with you, but please do share it now.
Okay. So much of our communications with people in detention was made possible by the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights. They have comités populares on the ground in various towns and cities across Georgia, and they've been receiving a lot of calls. That hotline number is 770-457-5232, and Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta chapter has also been really doing a lot of direct community engagement and receiving reports. Their hotline is 404-890-5655, and for folks who call the hotline, they have about a half-dozen languages available. SPLC's hotline number is 1-800-591-3656, and we are trying to connect detained individuals with immigration legal assistance from private practitioners and others in our area, as well as trying to visit folks and find out if there were civil rights violations.
Thank you, and thank you to the people who've been sharing the local raids hotline numbers. We've heard from New York, San Juan County, and Maryland. So if other people do have hotline numbers, please type them into the chat box, and again, we will share them with all the participants. So I'll move to our next speaker, who's going to talk about what happened in Austin, Texas. We have with us Christina Parker from Grassroots Leadership.
Hi, y'all. Thanks for having us on. So here in Austin, we saw raids. It looks like they started on Thursday and went through the weekend. We are still getting reports into our hotline right now, though, so we're working to confirm what those are and what those look like. It looks like it was Austin and the surrounding area, mostly in North Austin and East Austin. Some of the tactics we've heard of also included early morning door knocking, people being pulled over, and we also heard a lot about the collateral arrest. For us, we haven't, I don't think we have some of the detail that Georgia just had here, but one of the reports that I think is really troublesome to us are we've had multiple independent reports of our local police department, the APB, working with or being with ICE agents when they were doing the raids. That's obviously something that's really, really concerning to us. You know, I think we very much feel like we were targeted because of our so-called sanctuary city status, and that's really because of our local sheriff's stance on working with ICE, and for what it's worth, we did not receive any reports of sheriff's deputies working with ICE. So looking into the police involvement is going to be really important for us going forward. From our best estimate, we think between 60 and 70 people were caught up on raids. That's not a confirmed number, but it's a pretty good estimate based on the calls that have come into our hotline, the reports we've gotten from the community, and the Mexican consulate being able to confirm 44 Mexican nationals. Let me think, what else? Well, our hotline number for folks to write down and share with anyone you know in the area is 512-270-1515. Yeah, I think that's all I got for now. Thank you guys for having us on.
Thank you. Do we have Faye on? Okay. If not, I don't know, Christina, if you could talk a little bit too about the response.
Sure. Yeah, I think some of our immediate responses looked like, you know, we organized along with Faye, who wasn't able to join, and other attorneys, a pop-up legal clinic on Saturday night where we invited specifically families who had been impacted by this to come and get some legal advice. We also, during that time, and it's something we have ongoing as folders training, we call it. It's for folks to know what documents they need to put together for their families in case the worst should happen, so that folks can know that their children and finances and properties are all taken care of. So we train people on that. Our community hotline has been a place where we disseminate all of the information I just said. We also direct folks to the Texas Here to Stay Coalition's legal clinics, which are ongoing. And the other thing we have is our Sanctuary in the Streets network. Those are folks, mostly allies, who have been trained in civil disobedience, and our vision for that is that they would be able to be deployed when we knew of a live ICE raid, so that they could go and try to put their bodies between ICE and members of the communities. I think because of the way in which these were done, they were so targeted and happened so quickly. I don't think we were able to get anyone live on the scene until after it had happened, but it was really heartening for us to see how quickly and how many people responded to those calls and helped us really to chase down leads of actions happening, and were able to confirm what they did or didn't see, but also just how many people were willing to, at the drop of a hat, go to the site of a raid and try to stop it.
All right, thank you. So Faye, I think, is on the call, but for some reason it seemed like we couldn't hear you. So Faye, are you on?
I am on. Can you hear me now?
Oh, great. Yes, we can hear you now.
Sounds like that commercial. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I was like, oh, I'm here, and I missed the last part of what Christina had just said because I had to hang up and redial in. But I did put together a few things that I think were really important in terms of Austin's response to the ICE actions in our community. Post-election, we had organized a coalition called Texas Here to Stay, which involved all of the nonprofit groups doing immigration, a lot of private bar, social workers, teachers, and other organizations like Grassroots Leadership. And we were able to have a series of meetings and ultimately start doing Know Your Rights presentations along with attorney consultations. So we had private bar and nonprofit attorneys going and doing consultations with people who had immigration questions. And that dovetailed really well with our ability to respond to the ICE actions in our community, because you know, everyone was sort of doing their own thing, but we were already in communication with each other, and were able to kind of refer and set up and do sort of that pop-up clinic for individuals who were directly affected by the raid, with the help of Grassroots Leadership, who had been, you know, taking those calls and was able to kind of gather and direct people to a central location so that we could review those cases and speak to people specifically.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we still have your slides on the legal response. So I know you just covered some of that, but if there's anything else you wanted to add, feel free to do so.
Sure. I think right now the important thing is that we're still vetting those cases. So we have all the case intakes, and there's definitely some possible suppression issues, or looking into any issues working with local law enforcement. I know in local areas like in Leander, we have confirmed in Leander that a local police officer called ICE on the spot after a minor traffic accident. There's some reports of working with APD, but based on the consultations, I'm not sure notes if it's all that clear, so we have to investigate.
All right, thank you. So we can move next then to Los Angeles. And we will be sending these slides out to everybody in case you feel that you missed anything. You would definitely receive them within a day or so. So for Los Angeles, we have Carla from CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles, who's going to talk about what happened in LA last week.
Hello everybody, sorry I was getting off mute. So yes, we wanted to talk about what happened here. Once we were able to confirm what we considered unusual activity, we definitely reached out to what we've been creating and forming with the help of other organizations like HNILC, the Raids Rapid Response Network, which had been inactive but reactivated and in full effect now since the election or right before. So what we did is that we started to reach out for more confirmations, always keeping in mind the community's concerns to not cause unnecessary stress. And then we sent our 4 attorneys to B18, both to be able to confirm activity and numbers, and also to be able to help families. So as we were there, when I went in, the officer told me there were over 100 bodies in there, so that's what we sent out our action response at B18 in the afternoon. B18 is the area in LA where people get processed for deportation or to be processed to a detention center. So on the next slide, I'm going to go into specifics about what we did as an organization and as a network to respond the next day. So we held a press conference the next day because we thought it was really important to say what was happening, because we knew that ICE was going to deny it and just try to say it's business as usual, which we know it's not, because of the ongoing calls and the pouring calls to our allies and other private attorneys that were calling us here at CHIRLA saying, hey, this is not normal. I keep getting calls from these areas. We also held ongoing Know Your Rights trainings for people, and we know that these things are shifting. I feel like it's not the same Know Your Rights presentation that we could have given maybe like a year ago, because they're using different tactics. So we're working on updating all that information, but we're just asking people to just be careful. Then we also had free legal consultations for community members. We had a lot of people come in that were scared and that they were reacting. We talked to families that had people recently detained, and we're keeping a database about how they were detained and specifics as much as we can get from family members as to how, what, where, and trying to gauge the why. So that's what we did as an organization the next day. And then I do want to share on the next slide some of our concerns and to, what we were able to do. This is pretty case specific, but I know it's not an isolated incident. So as we were waiting outside, one of the families that had called, we were able to get his information from a colleague. And then as we were preparing, as we had sent one of our attorneys inside to interview him, we knew, we met up with the family member that was going to see him. And that's when we were able to start kind of helping this individual. Everybody wants to say that everybody that got picked up had a criminal record, but this person has no record. And we were able to kind of get a idea what we could do to help him, which was not easy due to the actions of the ICE themselves. So when we knew that he had a prior order through notario fraud, we just worked diligently to file a stay, which was denied because the officer said things have changed now, which makes me believe that things have changed since this new administration took over. You can see in the picture there, that's us literally trying to file the stay at the window, and that's us working on the stay outside of the facility. So when we knew that was happening, we had to just take it up the other level. And I think this is where networks really matter. We were able to contact a private attorney that's one of our mentors and colleagues to do a Ninth Circuit stay. And we were able to work with NILC and their connections with the different consulates to ask that the person come back. But the challenges are the fact that they just, even with somebody that has like 4 attorneys working on a case, it's so hard and so resource heavy to stop a deportation once someone has a prior order. And it's difficult. So at the end, he was brought back, but not after having to deal with ICE just lying, saying, oh, we sent him out 2 hours ago, oh, he's been gone, oh, I'm not going to stop the bus until we get confirmation from the Ninth Circuit. All of this like just adding more stress to the situation. Once we were able to verify that he was back in LA, he was back in the detention center and the holding facility, he did tell us that he wasn't put on the bus until 6 o'clock. So just all that information going back and forth is really difficult to do an already difficult job. And I wanted to share this case specifically because I feel like it's definitely not isolated. And just FYI, he's currently detained in Adelanto, and we are working as best as we can on his actual motion now that we have a little bit more time, as opposed to the 2 hours that ICE gave us, and then the 2 minutes they gave us when we were knocking on the door trying to get an update. So that's kind of our experience here. Luckily, we're all kind of working together in different networks, but it is a lot just for like one organization or one network to take on. I feel like we have to pull from all areas, and we're always looking for volunteers or people that can get on the ground faster than us to figure out what's going on in any situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. And Carla's contact information and the contact information of all the guest presenters will be in the PowerPoint, so that if you do happen to want to volunteer for one of these local RAIDS response networks, you can contact the appropriate person. And also just to share that in LA there was an emergency protest announced that same night, and quite a few people did turn out and have a rally in front of the holding facility. So next we're going to talk about what individuals can do, since we've already discussed a bit of what organizations have been doing. So to go over that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jessie from NILC.
Yes, thanks, Xiuming. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I agree with Carla that as we're observing everything that's unfolding, the advice is probably going to evolve and get better, more specific. But to start with, I think it's clear that everyone needs to know that they have certain basic rights, no matter what Trump might be saying or who is president. And those include the right to remain silent and the right to refuse to speak to immigration officers. We have on the NILC website, but there are many other organizations doing Know Your Rights trainings. On the NILC website, it's nilc.org/knowyourrights, and we have a document called Everyone Has Certain Basic Rights No Matter Who is President that you can look at with more detail. One of the recommendations is to carry a Know Your Rights card, and to also carry any valid U.S. immigration document that you might have. Another recommendation we always make is not to open the door to anyone unless the officer can show you a warrant that's actually signed by a judge. Everyone has the right to speak to a lawyer, and before you sign anything, you should talk to a lawyer. And especially if you have children or any health concerns or any other factors that may cause you or your family to suffer if you are arrested, please let the ICE officers know. Let's go to the next slide. In terms of what you can do to take action around the raids, the first recommendation is to call your representative in Congress and tell them that you want the raids to stop immediately. The phone number for the Congressional Switchboard is 202-224-3121, and they can connect you to your representatives. We also encourage people to call their local elected officials, so their mayors, their governors, their state and local representatives, and demand that they take action to protect immigrant communities from these attacks by the Trump deportation force. We also encourage you to attend local marches and rallies and vigils that are being organized around the country to oppose the raids. There's a website that is compiling all of these kinds of actions, and you can find information there about local activities by entering your address or your zip code. That website is called togetherforimmigrants.com, and it's a crowdsourced website. So anyone who is planning a march or a vigil, it'd be great to notify those who are operating the website so that they can publicize it. And lastly, you can report and document raids. There's obviously many different places to do that, and as we get more information around the local raids hotlines that folks are sharing through the chat box, we will share those back with everyone. But there is one national hotline that's run by United We Dream, and that number is 844-363-1423. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessie. And Monica, are you on the phone? Monica, if you're on, we can't hear you. So, Jessie, do you want to just give a few thoughts about the role that elected officials can do once people contact them?
Sure, yeah. So a couple different things that elected officials can do. One thing is that they can send requests for information to the ICE field offices operating in the jurisdictions that the representatives cover. And when they make those requests, they can ask for details like whether there are new enforcement priorities and how the local field office is implementing those new enforcement priorities. They can ask about what operations are being developed and carried out. They can ask how many people have been arrested and detained. They can ask for the names of any individuals who've been arrested, as well as their A numbers, which is their alien registration number, the number that immigration gives everyone who's in their custody in their system. And they can also try to learn where those individuals are being held and of any expected transfers. So sometimes folks are held immediately after an arrest in a more local area, but then may be transferred farther away for longer term detention. Monica?
Hello? Yay, sorry, I was on and then the little thing said I was muted. Can you guys hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, Jessie, I wasn't able to hear what it was that you were saying. I'm sure it was great.
Yeah, no, I was just giving some ideas for things specifically that elected officials could ask local ICE field offices about, but didn't discuss anything other than that. So kind of got as far as the question of transfers, and then that was where we left off.
Sure. So I just wanted to start off by saying first, thank you, everyone, for not only just being on the call, but for the work that you do every day. And, you know, this is a really challenging time for all of us. And I think I just want to acknowledge that this is really difficult and that the work that everyone's doing is really, really important. So put that out there. And also just to express, firstly, that my views are my own. I don't represent a committee or a member of Congress, but I am sharing some information from my perspective. I think the first thing that I would say is when you are considering how to respond to a raid, either individually or sort of a group raid, don't forget about members of Congress. I know that it's pretty easy to you know, you triage what's happening in your community and not necessarily always think, oh, we need to, you know, contact our member of Congress. But it is important that you develop a relationship with your member of Congress. Even I know for those of you who may be in areas that possibly haven't had raids, but are worried about it, sort of cultivating a relationship with the local district office and DC office, so they know who you are and they know that you know, you're going to be giving them the best information that you can on what's happening on the ground is really, really important. I do want to say that there are numerous members of Congress that are incredibly concerned about not only about the raids, but about the direction immigration is going in this country. And so I would say that there, members of Congress want to hear from you. I can say at least mostly Democratic members of Congress want to hear from you, and Republican members of Congress need to hear from you even more so, is my personal opinion. A couple of things that we're doing. My boss, Representative Lofgren, introduced 2 bills, and those bills are H.R. 920, H.R. 921. The first bill is the Protecting Our Border Communities Act, and the second one is the Community Trust Act. Both bills would rescind the executive orders on border and interior enforcement, and so they're pretty straightforward bills. It's our statement against an opposition to the Trump executive orders. If you're trying to give your member of Congress something to do, it's a really easy thing to do, is to co-sponsor both of those bills. They can contact the Judiciary Committee, and I can get them on that. That's one thing. We are meeting with Acting Director Tom Homan tomorrow on the ICE raids, and hope to get some more information from him. And so if you have specific questions, you can, definitely feel free to, email me or email Jesse, and Jesse can get them to me, whatever is most convenient. I will say that it's, in past meetings like this, we don't always get substantive answers, so I don't want to, give anyone the illusion that somehow we're going to get magical answers. But the point of the meeting is to express our concern and hopefully push back on what it is that we're seeing. I think one of the biggest challenges for members of Congress generally is that there are a lot of rumors about what is actually happening on the ground. And in my experience, one of the hardest things is, and obviously we all know that raids are not necessarily a new phenomenon. They've been happening for a very long time. And one of the challenging things as a staffer and members of Congress is trying to distinguish between rumor and truth. And so I would say that I think that probably the best thing that your offices can, so the best thing that you all can do is try to get us the stories about what's happening on the ground, like you are doing. And then if you have affected individuals, children, teachers, people that are allies, have those people go into your member's district office and go talk to them. We need to gather those real stories, and then those also have to be communicated to members. The other thing I would say is I found it very useful. The little clips I was able to see on social media this past weekend were helpful. So getting photos and videos, and it sort of reminds me of sort of the police brutality movement, and the fact that the increase in social media allowed sort of the American public to have images of what was happening to mostly Black men in this country. And similarly, I think getting pictures and images of these raids, I think one of the challenging things under the Obama administration is that a lot of the raids happened in the middle of the night, or 4 or 5 a.m. and it was dark, and people, were groggy, and there's not very many images of it. I think it's interesting that Trump decided to do them during the daytime, and a lot of these, so there's videos, there's images, and I think, he intended to get those videos and get those images. But at the same time, it does allow us to tell a little bit of a different story. And when ICE says that they're not doing X, Y, and Z, it's so helpful to have, a picture or a video to say, well, actually, we have evidence that you are doing it. The other thing that I think that we're trying to do, and I know all of you are doing, and that's talked about a little bit on the webinar, is really resisting the trap of labeling all of these individuals as criminals. As you know, the executive order expands the definition of what a priority is and really what a criminal is to include almost any individual down the street. The example that I use is if you have ever driven without a license, as I have, you would be a priority under the enforcement priorities. So it is such an expansive list of priorities, and I think it's important to know how ICE is characterizing it, what the messaging that they're using is, and then we can also use our own messaging. And so I would say that definitely developing a relationship with your member in DC, but also next week is President's Day recess, and so all members of Congress will be in the district office. Try to get a meeting, right? Try to get a meeting with your member and if not, like with their staff, but try and be persistent and let them see your face and let them know that you are, oppose these raids, and then bring a family member or bring a teacher or bring an affected individual and try. I mean, I think the goal of all of this is to, we have to humanize this, and I think that members of Congress can help in some ways by elevating those voices, and the members of Congress that are resistant should be made to see the faces of the people that are affected by their policies.
All right, thank you so much, Monica. So you'll see some links to materials on raids and preparing for raids, and we've been getting a lot of questions through the chat box, so let's just jump right in. I think the first question, maybe Faye or Myra, you could take this. It is, can you explain what mobile biometrics units are, and do people have the right to refuse to give their fingerprints?
Yeah, so mobile units are devices that ICE agents often use, and I believe local law enforcement also have them, and it essentially lets them take the fingerprints of an individual on the moment and have an automatic report of that individual, and possible pass both immigration and criminal records, depending on what records they have for that individual. And I believe that an individual, if requested to take the fingerprint, actually has to take it, but others can chime in on whether there's any recommendations on refusing to take one.
Yeah, does anybody have any thoughts about people's rights to refuse to give the fingerprint at that moment when they're approached by an ICE agent who has a hand?
This is Lauda from STLC. We don't have a clear answer to that yet, but we do know that under the Fourth Amendment, people don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy in their fingerprint per se, because we leave our fingerprints everywhere. So we're still trying to think of some challenges to that.
Thank you. And there's a couple of questions about whether these recent raids are reflective of the new enforcement priorities, which, as Monica mentioned, are extremely broad and expensive, or are these just a continuation of what we saw under the Obama administration? I don't know if Christina or others.
Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is Faye. So we received confirmation from Immigration and Customs and Enforcement via an email when we did inquiries about ICE actions, and they confirmed that they are, prioritizing and also doing non-priority enforcement. So I think, while there's no sort of national memorandum or guidelines out, I think it's safe to assume that that's exactly what's happening.
This is Monica. Can I answer? Hello?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I spoke with ICE on Friday morning, and they explained to me that if they're not calling it raids, they're calling it targeted enforcement actions, and they're focused specifically on particular individuals, and if other individuals happen to be around, they will also question that person to find out if that person meets the new priorities as laid out in executive order. So the difference is, whereas under the Obama administration, their priorities they were using were the November 2014 ones, what ICE told me is that they are, in fact, using the new priorities as laid out in the most recent executive order.
Shameen, this is Jessie, can I just hop on that?
Sure.
and clarify two additional things? So under the 2014 priorities, 87% of the population that was undocumented was not a priority for enforcement under the November 20th, 2014 priorities memo. The new priorities as of January 25th, based on the Interior Enforcement Executive Order, include anyone who ICE agents believe pose a threat to public safety, as well as the people who would fall under the example that you gave, that Monica gave of driving without a license. So when you make the priorities that broad, it really opens the door for ICE agents to make lots of determinations in the moment that make it difficult to kind of hold them accountable as far as, you know, specific priorities. So I just wanted to clarify that, since I think there's a lot of confusion about how this is different from, you know, the enforcement under Obama.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. And somewhat related, there's a question about whether these actions are targeting cities or are they broader? Anybody want to chime in? Maybe Laura, since you shared about the raids happening all across Georgia.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. It was, are these raids targeting sanctuary cities or are they broader?
Well, since Georgia hasn't declared it, or Atlanta hasn't declared itself a sanctuary city, despite pressure from a coalition of community organizations, the Georgia January 20th Coalition, I would say that it is broader because we saw enforcement activity in North Georgia. We saw some enforcement activity in a 287G county, in Savannah, which is a conservative place, in Augusta, and even in a small town like Moultrie. So I do think it's broader, but that's not to say that that may not be the case in other places, such as Austin.
All right, thank you. And there's some questions about setting up a mobile text alert system as part of a raids response network. Do any of you have thoughts about that, whether that would be effective, or have you tried that out in your areas?
This is Faye. We established a mobile or a text alert system for the attorneys who had signed up via questionnaire, and we deployed it for the first time this weekend, and it seemed to be pretty effective. We use an application called Remind Me, I think, remind.com. And it was pretty easy to use. I think the challenge is going to be keeping up with it and developing sort of the standards and of when that is utilized, especially as we are learning about how enforcement is going to be occurring over the course of the next few years.
All right, thank you. And there's a couple of questions about schools, which maybe Carla or Faye or somebody else could help to answer, which is, have there been any enforcement actions at schools, and what can schools do to protect their immigrant students?
This is Faye. I can start with that. So under we have to assume that since it hasn't been rescinded, there's a 2011 memo that clearly specifies that I should not be going in schools and in sanctuaries. And until that's rescinded, I think that's the policy. It doesn't have the force of law. And it doesn't mean that ICE won't carry out its activities in the perimeters of schools. We had several panicked phone calls from a couple of superintendents that we have confirmed, you know, one from a charter school area, one from a locality that more rural, but it's nearby Austin, where there were reports of ICE, and it sort of the families became very scared. At the same time, this weekend, Educate Austin, which is the teachers union here, did a workshop for teachers to teach teachers what to do in this situation. It was very successful, and we were able to, you know, confirm with teachers that I shouldn't be showing up on property without a warrant, you know, requesting someone in that via their own policy. They're not there, but I think school districts can also pass resolutions and come up with plans. AISD sent out a bunch of Know Your Rights information to 3,000 students this past week as well, and just kind of helped answer some practical questions that teachers had. But the note from our community, no confirmed, you know, action by ICE on school campuses, but possibly around while they were getting other people. We also know that the most dangerous time for parents who are dropping off based on the patterns that we were seeing is that ICE may be following people as they leave their homes rather than knocking on the doors. And then one case that we're still trying to confirm, but the father dropped off the children and was picked up by ICE 2 blocks away, and they were looking for the gentleman's brother-in-law and not him, but he was picked up. And that was enough to send a lot of panic through the schools.
Thank you. And to add to the part about schools passing different resolutions, NILC has developed some model language for both K-12 schools and higher educational institutions with sample language that they can adopt to prevent ICE from accessing campuses without a judicially signed warrant and creating other protections for both immigrant and non-immigrant students. So you can look in the NILC website for some of that model language and talk to your local school board or your higher ed institution to see if they can adopt some of those languages, that language or resolution. There's also some questions to, I think this is for Monica or Jesse, about whether it's worth trying to develop a relationship with a congressperson if they have run on an anti-immigrant platform or otherwise indicated they're not very supportive of immigrant communities.
Monica, I think so. I know that I grew up in the Deep South, and so I understand what it's like to have a member of Congress that doesn't necessarily reflect your opinion. But I think it's important that community members insist that anti-immigrant members of Congress be sort of forced to see the impacts of dangerous immigration policies. And that's why I said, for example, you know, if there are parents that are deported, bring their children in, right? Have the children tell staff and tell members of Congress. Or I know the teachers have been really active in raids, and they were really active in raids previously in the Obama administration, having teachers come talk about what this means for their students, guidance counselors, you know, obviously pastors and ministers. And so I think that, you know, I know that you may not have the most receptive audience, and it may seem a little bit like, you know, like Sisyphus, but I think it's a really important thing to do. And you don't know at the end of the day whether you may have a staffer that's actually sympathetic, that may actually help out, even if the member of Congress can't publicly do something. You don't know. I mean, I do know in previous raids, you've had sort of really rabidly anti-immigrant offices really go to bat for individual constituents, even though publicly they were silent. So just, I think, keep that in mind. And they also kind of need to see who their constituency is, right?
Great, thank you. So there's a couple of questions about sort of the demographics or characteristics of the people who were picked up. So maybe Carla or Christina or Laura can answer these. One is whether any lawful permanent residents were picked up, and the other is for the people who were picked up for former removal orders, how old were those removal orders?
Yes, I can answer some of that. So I have not gotten a report of legal permanent residents as of today. We did get a call about a citizen being picked up, a naturalized citizen. So we're actually going to try to get more information about his case soon. I'm supposed to see him tomorrow. And then in terms of the removal order for the case that we're working on, it's from 2011. And I think it goes back to people's rights and knowing their rights. When they opened the door, he told them he had a removal order when they said, what's your status? So, you know, that's that case anyway.
Does anybody else want to add anything about who was picked up?
In Austin, we saw a large number of men picked up, although there was a couple of reports of some women that that I haven't been able to confirm.
which makes it harder because those detention facilities are a little further away from Austin and are pretty spread out across the state for men. And in terms of prior orders, it seems to be, from no order to, or criminal history to, older orders. And certainly we saw some folks with more recent orders from Central America who may have been, who were part of that enforcement action this weekend.
Thank you. There are some questions from people who have DACA asking if they currently have DACA, are they still protected? Could ICE pick them up?
Obviously, this is I don't think we could talk about every single case, but we've gotten some reports from attorneys of people with DACA being picked up and not released. I think one was in, I believe, I want to say like Pennsylvania, and the other one was like in Bakersfield, California. So I just feel like I can't say that they won't be, arrested or whatnot. I feel like officers feel very powerful right now, the ICE officers. They feel like the discretion is theirs. And so as we track more cases, we can let people know, but I think I can't say everyone's safe at this point.
And Carla, for those cases, did people have some type of criminal conviction, or did they just happen to get picked up when ICE was already in the area?
One of them, let me pull up the information, was from a person whose father was picked up, and this was refusing to let him go, to let the son go. And the other one was a DACA who got picked up at work. I don't know exactly the location. It's a DACA denial, okay, that didn't get the discretion. And the other one was a DACA that was going to pay a ticket with the ticket clinic lawyers, and he didn't get, he got picked up and they haven't taken him. And that was in Bakersfield, and he's in Mesa Verde, Bakersfield.
Okay, so we have time for one last question, which is, I think some of you have mentioned that ICE's tactics are different than tactics they've used in the past. So aside from using the broadly expanded idea of who's a priority now, what are some ways in which the tactics are now different, and what are some things people can do to challenge these tactics?
I can jump in. This is Laura. It's not that this is new, because we did see the use of ruses in prior raids, but we're concerned that technique might expand, in particular just stoking fears based on racism, to have agents tell people at home that they're looking for a criminal suspect in their home and showing a mugshot of someone who's African American. And I think it would just be very important to let people know that this tactic has been used in doing community work, not to unduly alarm them, but just to raise that healthy suspicion and to practice that maybe in even a role-playing way, that scenario, to make sure people can say, we're not going to let you in here unless you have a warrant. Of course, we know that if the police have exigent circumstances, they can sometimes enter without a warrant, but that I would leave to each organization how they want to approach that situation. But I do think people should know about the ruses. And another thing is that, at least here in Georgia, we're seeing that a lot of the actions are done early in the morning when people are going to work and taking their kids to school. I'm not sure what exactly can be done about that. We've discussed having people do carpools and having folks with documentation driving and with a driver's license, but we know that that alone also will not deter agents from detaining other individuals.
Does anybody else want to share any final last thoughts about responses to these tactics? Okay, if not, this has been a very informative and very sobering webinar. So thank you to everybody who presented, particularly since I know we organized this over the weekend, so thank you for being available. Unfortunately, it seems that increased enforcement is going to continue in the near future, and so we will share out resources so that people can connect to local networks in your area or create your own networks if one doesn't already exist, so that we can be more effective and respond to raids and any other kinds of enforcement tactics. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us, and we will send you a copy of the PowerPoint and a link to the recording tomorrow. Thank you.